Supreme Court is set to hear a high-profile case tomorrow, pitting free speech and religious rights against same-sex equality. This after a Colorado baker refused to make a wedding cake for a gay couple. He claims baking that cake would support something that goes against his religion and says his First Amendment rights allowed him to turn their business away. And as for that couple, they argue discrimination, setting up what will mark the first full-scale test of gay rights since the Supreme Court legalized same-sex weddings nationwide 2 years ago. Joining me now is John Corvino, professor of philosophy at Wayne State University. Also here is Ryan T. Anderson, senior research fellow at the Heritage Foundation. They are both co-authors of the book Debating Religious Liberty and Discrimination, and there are a lot of young people across America who've seen you guys on stage go at it, and of course they're reading your writings rather. So thank you for being here, gentlemen. Ryan, I want to go to you first. What essentially at the very center is this case about?
Sure, this case is about whether or not the government can force a creative professional to express a message that he disagrees with. In this case, it centers on how he believes what marriage is, but it could be about any belief. And the question is, can the state force a creative professional to express a message that he disagrees with? And the answer is no. The Constitution doesn't allow the states to do this.
John, you say the baker was wrong. Why?
Well, I don't think this is about the government forcing anybody to send any message, but about whether religious freedom or freedom of speech gives people a license to discriminate. And I think one way to understand the case is to look at another case where the Supreme Court considered whether the First Amendment gives exemptions to anti-discrimination law. It's different in a number of ways, but there are important similarities. Back in the 1960s, Maurice Bessinger did not want to serve African Americans at his barbecue joints, Piggy Park Barbecue. Now, he said he was happy to serve them takeout, but that, was a bridge too far for him to allow interracial dining. And he cited his First Amendment free speech rights, his religious liberty rights. Suppose we were to update that case and say, Maurice Bessinger is alive now, he wants to operate a bakery, and he says, you know what, I'll let all kinds of people come into my bakery, black, white, all different people, but interracial marriage is still a bridge too far for me, and I don't want to allow, use my creative expression to support this message of support for interracial marriage.
I think we'd say he
ought to lose that case, and for the same reason Jack Phillips ought to lose this case.
Yeah, but Ryan, you're saying that you don't anticipate that they will lose this case. Why not?
No, I mean, the Supreme Court has ruled twice within the past 20 years that the First Amendment protects a free exercise, a free speech right against speaking a message where you disagree, even in the context of LGBT rights. There are two Supreme Court cases right on point where there was a sexual orientation non-discrimination law. The states said someone had to endorse expression with which they disagreed, and then the Supreme Court reversed. The Supreme Court said, you can't do that, states. People have a First Amendment free speech right not to speak messages with which they disagree. John's just wrong about the case law here.
John?
I think there's a really important difference with the cases that Ryan mentioned, which is that neither of those have to do with public accommodations. That's one thing I want to say. Another thing
They were both public accommodations law.
But were we talking about a business open to the public?
One was a parade, and the other case was the Boy Scouts. But it was both
okay, yeah,
public accommodation
right, of course. Yeah, I'm
right.
very familiar with both of those cases. But parades,
we're going to run out of time here, and I just want to
Sure.
step in here real quickly, because I know you guys have gone back and forth about this one issue, this baker in Colorado, and the Supreme Court. Where do you see this falling down real quickly? John, you first.
Well, I want to say that in cases where we're talking about expressing a message, like a parade, that's one thing. This is a public business. And as the American Unity Fund brief said, nobody looks at a wedding cake and says, the baker has endorsed this union. We're stretching the notion of speech if we treat this as a First Amendment case, which is weird for people, social conservatives, who say we want to interpret the Constitution strictly, and yet they're treating cakes as free speech.
Ryan, last word.
Sure, the court has said repeatedly that art counts as speech. What we need to do in America is find a way to agree to disagree about gay marriage. If you're in favor of same-sex marriage, you can be free to live that out. But if you're not in favor of it, you need to also be free not to be forced to express support for it.
All right,
it needs to be a two-way street.
John Corvino, Ryan Anderson, thank you both very much. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
And of course, we'll follow the news
Thank
on
you.
this as